From high above the southwestern corner of the state of Georgia, we zoom in on what was one of the most notorious prison camps of the American Civil War, called Andersonville, also known as Hell on Earth. For any Northern soldier having the accursed misfortune of being caught and imprisoned rather than killed or wounded upon the field of battle was facing a fate often much worse than any injury could inflict, even a mortal one. In prisons like Georgia's Andersonville, you slowly wither away in the agony of starvation that can last for many months. With much of people's attention focused on Andersonville, as I'm about to do, it was by no means the only Civil War-era hell on earth called a prison. There were others, both in the North and in the South, but Andersonville was, by all accounts, the worst. In the 15 months that Andersonville was operated, more than 13,000 men and boys never saw the outside of the stockade again, having succumbed to malnutrition, exposure, disease, and diarrhea, all of which the horrifying conditions of captivity at Andersonville produced. Imagine, if you can, the loneliness of dying in such a God-forsaken place, and so far away from home and family. Each day, those who were healthy enough were impressed or volunteered to bury their comrades nearby at the prison cemetery. Even though the work must have been horrid, the inmates nevertheless looked forward to getting out of the stockade, even if only for a short while. The Civil War brought many necessities to civilians and soldiers alike. The creativity used by Americans, both from the North and the South, to obtain these necessities ushered forth dozens, if not hundreds, of what I call Civil War firsts, in the field of linguistics and countless tangible inventions that saw widespread use. One of those Civil War firsts is the term deadline, which comes down to us directly from its origins in the prisons of our Civil War. Just inside the 12-foot-high stockade wall at Andersonville was a short, single-rail fence demarcating a no-man's land, or deadline. Any prisoner caught on or near this deadline was immediately shot dead by one of the guards posted at intervals high upon the stockade wall. Another word or phrase that can be traced to Andersonville itself is another many of us are familiar with. Most of the prisoners lived in holes scratched into the ground. If he was fortunate, he had, or could scavenge, enough material to build his own shebang. The story about the origins of the word shebang says that a prisoner was showing off his quarters to a new arrival when the new arrival asked, "This is where you live? This is all you have?" And the prisoner responded, "This is it, the whole shebang." Providence Spring was a recognized blessing to every prisoner who was fortunate enough to taste of its clean water. Before the spring began to well up above ground during a storm in the winter of 1864, the only source of drinking water for the wretched inhabitants of Andersonville was a filthy creek. This creek served as both drinking water and sewer. Those who drank from it were then susceptible to any number of ghastly diseases. Diarrhea, scurvy, and gangrene would prove to be the death of countless thousands of healthy men and boys confined at Andersonville. The story is told that lightning struck during a storm, and this natural underground spring opened up, providing much-needed fresh water to the prisoners. The spring is still active today. Prisoners entered through the north gate at Andersonville. Built with heavy timbers into the stockade wall, the walls were 12 foot high, made from rough-hewn timbers, stood upright in wall trenches dug to a depth of 5 feet. The impressment of various slaves provided the labor needed for the construction of the prison. Archaeological investigation has gleaned some interesting facts about the prison and the slaves who were impressed to help build it. Found in the wall trench near the north gate were an iron axe head that was apparently broken and discarded into the trench they were digging. Small remains of cow and pig bones, also discovered in the wall trenches, indicate what may have been a meal for those laboring on the trenches. Shortly after the close of the Civil War, the commandant at Andersonville Prison, Captain Henry Wirz, was tried and convicted of several capital crimes. One of the 150 eyewitnesses who testified at Wer's trial was a young man named Billy Bates, only 15 years old when he arrived at Andersonville. With a healthy and positive attitude towards survival, Billy Bates and his friend, Dick King, began plotting their course for living and escaping. Before their plans for escape could be carried out, an informer notified Wer's of the boys' plan. To teach Billy Bates a lesson, Wer's tied his thumbs together and hung the boy from a beam over the gateway in plain view of everyone in camp. A compassionate fellow prisoner gave Billy some water from an old slop pan and was immediately shot dead by an angry boy, who then turned to Billy and shot him twice in the left thigh and leg. Pissed off prisoners began to gather, and the guards ran the commandant off to safety. The prisoners cut the boy down and took care of him the best they could. His friend, Dick King, shared his rations with him and nursed him back to health, keeping his wounds wet day and night to prevent the onset of gangrene. After Billy had recovered, the two boys spent 8 months digging an 18 by 24-inch tunnel that reached past the prison wall. It was barely large enough to crawl through. On the night of March 2nd, 1864, 13 months after the prison doors slammed closed behind them, the two boys escaped. They traveled at night, hid during the day in forests for food, assisted by some ex-slaves. 3 weeks later, they reached the Union lines near Bridgeport, Alabama. Billy Bates weighed 60 pounds, and his friend Dick weighed 64 pounds when they were received by President Lincoln at the White House on April 28, 1864. They told him all they knew about the horrors at Andersonville. When they had finished, the president sprang to his feet and exclaimed, "My God, when will this accursed thing end?" Another teenage prisoner was not as lucky when he tried to escape. One of his fellow prisoners, Thomas W. Way, testified at Wer's trial. "He was a young fellow. I knew him by the name of Fred. He was about 17 years old. When we heard the dogs coming, I and another prisoner who was with me, being old hands, climbed a tree. He tried to do so, but he had not got up when the hounds caught him by the foot and pulled him down. And in less than 3 minutes he was all torn to pieces. After the war ended, the prison reverted back to private hands, and for 35 years thereafter, the property was used to grow cotton and other crops. Then, in 1891, the Georgia Division of the Grand Army of the Republic acquired the land. During their administration, stone monuments were constructed to mark various portions of the prison, including the 4 corners of the inner stockade and the north and south gates. The plot of ground near the prison where nearly 13,000 Union soldiers had been buried was administered by the United States government as a national cemetery. Andersonville National Memorial Park in southwestern Georgia is open to visitors year-round.